There were times in my life when I stood before challenges so great that my mind itself whispered, "This is too difficult, too heavy, too much for you." I remember one winter morning during training. My body was cold, my muscles weak, and my spirit wanted to escape. My mind said, "Stop, this is impossible." But in that very moment, I discovered something profound. The mind is like a wild horse. It resists, it rebels. It throws you down until you learn how to master it. The method I began to use, I now call the lotus method. Just as the lotus rises from the mud, untouched and pure, we too can rise above resistance, excuses, and mental laziness. You do not force the lotus to bloom, you create the conditions for it. In the same way, you do not force the brain harshly, you guide it, shape it, and train it. And then, what once seemed impossible becomes effortless. Today, I will share with you 12 powerful principles of the lotus method to train your brain to do hard things, even when everything inside you says, "I can't." Number 1. Acknowledge the mud. When you look at a lotus flower, rising beautifully above the water, shining untouched by the dirt beneath, it is easy to forget where it came from. We admire its purity, but we often neglect the truth. The lotus begins its life buried deep in the mud. Without the mud, there would be no lotus. Without difficulty, there would be no strength. Without resistance, there would be no transformation. This is why the very first step in forcing your brain to do hard things is to acknowledge the mud. Too many people waste their energy denying it, avoiding it, or complaining about it. They say, "Why is this so hard? Why is life unfair? Why do I struggle so much?" But the mud is not your enemy. The mud is your training ground. The mud is where you find the nutrients for your growth. I remember one winter when I was still a young student in training. The mornings in the monastery were bitter cold. The stone floor froze my bare feet, and the air burned my lungs as I inhaled. At 4 a.m., when the bell rang, my first thought was always, "I cannot do this today." My mind screamed for comfort, to stay in the warmth, to remain in ease. But the truth is, no matter how much I resisted, the morning would always come, the bell would always ring, and the training would still be there waiting for me. In those moments, I learned to stop resisting the mud. Instead, I whispered to myself, "Yes, this is cold. Yes, this is uncomfortable. But this is also my path." When I acknowledged the mud, the struggle lost some of its power. Because once you see the mud as part of the process, you stop wasting energy fighting it, and instead use that energy to rise above it. The same principle applies to the difficult tasks in your daily life. Perhaps you are a student who fears studying long hours. Perhaps you are an entrepreneur fighting through rejection after rejection. Or maybe you are simply a human being struggling with your own self-doubt. If you spend all your time wishing the mud was not there, you miss the opportunity to grow from it. I once guided a student who wanted to build discipline. He told me, "Master, I hate waking up early. It feels like torture." I asked him a simple question. "Do you expect the lotus to bloom without touching the mud? Why do you think your growth should come without touching your discomfort?" Slowly, he began to shift his view. Instead of saying, "This is torture," he started to say, "This is my mud. This is where I plant my roots." Over time, he stopped hating the difficulty and started respecting it. That shift in mindset was the true beginning of his growth. When you acknowledge the mud, you free yourself from the illusion that life should always feel easy. The brain wants comfort, but the soul wants evolution, and evolution cannot happen without resistance. The weights in the gym must be heavy for your muscles to grow. The silence in meditation must be long for your mind to settle. The challenges in life must be real for your spirit to strengthen. So, do not curse your mud, embrace it. When you feel resistance, whisper to yourself, "This is my soil, this is my foundation, this is where my lotus begins." Every struggle you face is not proof of weakness but evidence of your potential. The lotus flower does not apologize for the mud that gave birth to it, neither should you. Acknowledge your mud, respect it. Because one day, when you rise above it, you will look back and understand, it was never your obstacle, it was your root. Number 2. Start smaller than the mind expects. One of the greatest illusions the brain creates is the belief that progress requires giant leaps. When people think of transformation, they imagine radical change. Waking up at 4 a.m. every day, running 10 kilometers, meditating for hours, or working tirelessly without rest. But when the task is too big, the brain immediately resists. It says, impossible, too much, not today. And so, instead of moving forward, we remain paralyzed. This is why the secret is not to aim for the giant leap, but to begin with a step so small that the mind cannot refuse. I discovered this lesson during my early years of training. In the monastery, we would often be asked to perform hundreds, sometimes thousands, of repetitions, punches, kicks, stances, or even silent meditation for long stretches. When I was young, I looked at these numbers and felt overwhelmed. My brain whispered, "How can you possibly finish this? You will fail." But one of my teachers smiled and said, "Do not think of 1,000, think only of one. Begin with the first strike, the first breath, the rest will take care of itself." I began to apply this teaching. Instead of focusing on finishing 1,000 strikes, I placed all my attention on the first one. Then I moved to the second, then the third. To my surprise, the brain became quiet. It no longer screamed about impossibility because it could not argue with one simple action. Slowly, without realizing it, I reached 100, then 500, then 1,000. This is the hidden power of starting smaller than the mind expects. The brain cannot resist what feels too small to be a threat. Think of a person who has never exercised. If they say, "Tomorrow I will run 5 kilometers, the mind resists. It creates excuses. You are not ready. You are too tired. Start next week. But if instead they say, "I will put on my shoes and walk for 2 minutes, the brain has no defense. And once they begin, 2 minutes often becomes 10, then 30. The simple act of starting opens the doorway to momentum. In my own life, I use this principle daily. There are mornings when my mind does not want to sit for meditation. It whispers, "Skip today. It is too hard." In those moments, I trick my mind by saying, "Just breathe for 2 minutes, nothing more." But once I begin, the resistance fades. 2 minutes often becomes 20, and by the end, I realize the task that felt impossible was only my brain's illusion. This principle is not only for physical training, it applies to every hard thing in life. If you want to write a book, do not pressure yourself with the thought, "I must write 300 pages. Begin with 1 sentence. If you want to study for an exam, do not force yourself to think of 10 chapters. Begin with reading 1 paragraph. The moment you start, your brain shifts from resistance to flow. The task that once looked like a mountain now feels like a series of steps. The lotus does not rise from the mud in a single leap. It grows millimeter by millimeter, unseen beneath the water, until one day it breaks the surface and blooms. Your progress is the same. Small beginnings, repeated with consistency, create unimaginable transformation. So, whenever your mind resists a hard task, do not fight it with force, outsmart it with simplicity. Start so small that your brain has no reason to say no. And once you begin, momentum will carry you forward. The power to transform your life is not hidden in one giant action, but in the smallest step you are willing to take right now. Number 3. Shift from emotion to action. One of the most common traps of the human mind is waiting for the right feeling before taking action. People tell themselves, "I will exercise when I feel motivated. I will work when I feel inspired. I will study when I feel ready." But the truth is, if you wait for the perfect emotion, you will wait your entire life. The brain is designed to protect you from discomfort, and it does so by convincing you to stay still, to delay, to remain in the safe arms of comfort. I remember one morning in training, when the rain was pouring heavily, the ground was soaked, the air was cold, and every part of my body wanted to stay in the warmth of the hall. My mind whispered, "Not today. Wait until the weather improves. You are too tired for this." If I had listened to that emotion, I would have missed the training, and slowly this small excuse would have become a habit. But instead, I reminded myself of a lesson my teacher once gave me. Do not ask your body how it feels. Tell your body what to do. So, I stepped outside into the rain. The first steps were heavy, but soon, the rhythm took over. After a few minutes, the cold no longer mattered. My body grew warm, my breath steady, and my spirit alive. What began as reluctance turned into flow. That day I learned, emotions follow action, not the other way around. If you move first, the feelings will adjust. If you wait for the feelings, the action will never begin. Think about this in your own life. How many dreams are left unfulfilled because someone waited for motivation? How many books remain unwritten? How many businesses never started? How many skills never learned, all because the person kept waiting to feel ready? The lotus does not wait for the perfect season to grow. It pushes upward even in harsh conditions, and by growing, it creates its own season. One of my students once told me, "Master, I want to meditate, but I never feel peaceful enough to begin." I smiled and said, "That is like waiting for the lake to become calm before you throw the stone. But the stone itself is what creates the ripples that lead to stillness." In the same way, meditation does not require peace at the beginning. It creates peace as you practice. Action is the stone you throw into the waters of your mind. This principle is especially powerful for tasks the brain labels as hard. Your emotions will always resist. You will feel fear before speaking in public, anxiety before starting a new project, or laziness before physical training. Do not interpret these feelings as proof that you should stop. Instead, see them as natural signals of growth. Then, take the first step regardless of how you feel. Once you are moving, the emotions shift. Fear gives way to courage. Laziness transforms into energy. Anxiety softens into clarity. In my own life, I often begin my mornings with movement, not because I always feel like it, but because I know the mind will never voluntarily offer me discipline. Discipline must come from action, and action must come before the emotion. Many times, I have begun my training with heaviness, but ended it with joy. Had I waited for joy first, the training would never have begun. So remember this truth. You do not need to feel ready to begin. You need to begin to feel ready. The sequence is not emotion-action. The true path is action-emotion. When your brain resists, whisper to yourself, "I will not wait for motivation, I will create it." Then move, even if it is one small step. The lotus blooms not because it feels like blooming, but because it rises anyway, and you too will rise, once you learn to shift from emotion to action. Number 4. Reframe the hard into the sacred. Most people approach difficult tasks with a heavy heart. They say, "This is hard, this is painful, this is unfair." And because they label it negatively, their brain strengthens the resistance. The more you call something a burden, the heavier it becomes. But here lies a powerful secret. If you change the meaning you give to difficulty, you change your entire relationship with it. When you stop calling it a punishment and start calling it sacred, the resistance begins to dissolve. I remember vividly my first months of intense martial training. The stances burned my legs until they shook uncontrollably. My arms ached from holding positions far longer than seemed possible. In my young mind, I thought, why do they torture us like this? Why must it be so hard? My teacher saw my frustration and came close. He placed his hand on my shoulder and said softly, "The stance you call torture is the temple where your discipline is worshipped. Do not see it as punishment. See it as prayer." That one sentence changed everything. The next day, when my legs trembled in the horse stance, I no longer told myself, "This is unbearable." Instead, I whispered, "This is my offering. This is how I bow to the path I have chosen." The pain did not disappear, but its meaning transformed. What once felt like suffering began to feel like devotion. This is the essence of reframing the hard into the sacred. Life will always present tasks that seem too heavy, long hours of work, endless repetitions, difficult conversations, the pursuit of mastery. If you keep seeing these moments as punishment, you will forever fight against them. But if you choose to see them as sacred, as opportunities to honor your discipline, to sharpen your spirit, to express gratitude for the gift of effort, suddenly, the hard thing becomes a blessing. One of my students once struggled with daily meditation. He complained, "Master, sitting still for so long is exhausting. My back hurts, my mind rebels. It feels like suffering." I asked him, "When you bow before a shrine, is it easy? When you stand in silence for someone you love, is it effortless? No, but you still do it, because it is sacred." I told him, meditation is your shrine. Your stillness is your offering. Do not see the pain as suffering, see it as reverence. Slowly, he began to shift. Each time he sat, instead of resisting, he whispered, "This is how I honor my journey." His practice deepened, not because the pain vanished, but because the meaning did. Think of the lotus again. When it pushes through the mud, it does not cry out, "This is hard." The struggle itself is its sacred path, the necessary ritual of growth. Without the resistance of the mud, the lotus would never bloom. The mud is not punishment. It is the holiest ground from which beauty arises. So, the next time you face something difficult, pause and reframe it. Instead of saying, "This is too hard," say, "This is sacred training." Instead of saying, "I am suffering," say, "I am strengthening." Instead of resisting, bow to it as you would bow to a temple. Your brain will resist as long as you see tasks as punishment. But once you see them as sacred offerings, your resistance turns into reverence. And reverence carries you farther than willpower ever could. Remember this, the hard things in life are not curses, they are ceremonies. They are not chains to break you, but altars to build you. Treat them as sacred, and they will elevate you. Number 5, the 5-breath rule. There is a small space between hesitation and action. It is in that space where most dreams die. The brain begins to negotiate. I will start later, maybe tomorrow is better. Let me check my phone first. Let me rest for 5 minutes. These tiny negotiations stretch into hours, days, sometimes years. And soon, the mountain of resistance grows so tall that the first step feels impossible. The 5-breath rule is a way to break this cycle. It is simple, but it is powerful. When your brain resists, take 5 slow, conscious breaths and then move. No more thinking, no more bargaining. Just 5 breaths, then immediate action. I first discovered the power of breath in moments of hesitation during training. Sometimes, we were told to begin a challenging exercise. Long-distance runs, heavy conditioning, or sparring with stronger opponents. My mind would freeze. My thoughts raced. You are not ready, this will hurt, you might fail. But one of my senior brothers once whispered to me, don't listen to the voice. Breathe. 5 breaths. Then go. I tried it. Inhale. Exhale. Slowly. 5 times. With each breath, the noise in my head softened. My body grew calmer. My focus sharper. By the time I finished the 5th breath, the decision was made. I moved without hesitation. It felt as if the fear had no time to root itself deeply. Since then, I have used this rule countless times, and I have shared it with many students. One young man came to me saying he struggled with procrastination. Every time he wanted to study, he felt a wave of anxiety, and instead of opening the book, he distracted himself. I gave him the 5-breath rule. The next week, he came back and said, "It works like magic. The moment I feel resistance, I pause, breathe 5 times, and then I open the book. Once I start, the fear is gone." Why does this work? Because the breath is the bridge between the mind and the body. When you hesitate, your nervous system activates, the heart beats faster, the muscles tense, the brain floods with excuses. By taking 5 slow breaths, you calm the system, you break the loop of overthinking, and you reset your state. The brain no longer has the chance to spin its endless stories. Instead, you anchor yourself in the present moment, and then you act. This principle extends far beyond physical or academic tasks. Imagine someone who is about to have a difficult conversation. Their emotions rise, their thoughts spiral. What if they reject me? What if I say the wrong thing? In that moment, instead of running from the conversation, they can breathe 5 conscious breaths. And then they speak. The action is taken not from panic, but from presence. That teaching struck me deeply. From then on, each training session became not something to survive until the end, but something to honor as it was happening. I began to reward myself inwardly for every second I held the stance, every drop of sweat, every tremble of endurance. Suddenly, the practice felt lighter, because I no longer carried the heavy burden of waiting for some far-off reward. One of my students once told me, "Master, I want to write a book, but it feels impossible. I know I will only be proud once it is finished." I told him, "If you only reward yourself at the end, your mind will collapse under the weight of the journey. Instead, reward yourself for each page, for each paragraph, for each sentence. See every act of writing as a seed. The tree will come, but you must love the planting." He followed this advice. Instead of focusing on the distant image of the finished book, he began to celebrate the small wins. After months, not only had he completed the book, but he said, "For the first time, the journey itself brought me joy." This is the secret. The brain thrives on rewards. If you only give it the reward once in a long while, it resists the hard path. But if you give it reward each day, not with food or material things, but with gratitude, recognition, and pride in effort, the brain learns to love the process. And when the brain loves the process, nothing can stop you. Think of the lotus again. Does it only shine when it blooms above the water? No. The beauty begins long before, when it pushes through the mud, when it stretches unseen in the darkness. The journey is sacred, not only the result. In my own life, I remind myself of this constantly. When I finish meditation, I do not say, "I will only be proud once I achieve enlightenment." I smile and say, "I am proud that I sat today, even for one breath." When I train, I do not wait for perfection. I honor the effort itself. So remember this truth. Reward the process, not the outcome. Find joy in the step, not only in the summit. Because life is not lived only at the finish line. Life is lived in every step of the journey. Number 9. Harness the power of pain. Most people see pain as an enemy. They run from it, they numb it, they complain about it. But what they do not realize is that pain is not here to destroy them. Pain is here to transform them. Pain is not the signal to stop. It is the invitation to grow. If you can learn to harness the power of pain, your brain will no longer resist hard things. Instead, it will recognize pain as the path towards strength. When I first began training, my body was not prepared for the demands of the Shaolin life. Hours of horse stance, thousands of punches, endless repetitions of forms. My muscles ached, my bones cried out. At night, I would lie in bed, and the pain in my legs was so sharp that even sleep felt like a luxury. In those moments, I wanted to quit. My mind told me, "This suffering is pointless, why continue?" But my teacher once said to me, "Do not curse the pain, respect it. Pain is the hammer that breaks the old shell, so the new strength can emerge." That day changed me. I stopped seeing pain as punishment. Instead, I started listening to it as a teacher. The ache in my legs told me my endurance was being forged. The burning in my lungs told me my capacity was expanding. The exhaustion in my body told me my limits were being shattered. And slowly, I began to welcome the pain, not because it was pleasant, but because it was meaningful. One of my students, a runner, once came to me discouraged. He said, "Master, every time I push myself beyond a few kilometers, my body hurts, and I lose all motivation." I told him, "What if you changed the meaning of that pain? Instead of saying this hurts, say this is growth. Instead of saying I want to stop, say this is where the transformation begins." He tried it. The next time he ran, when the pain came, he smiled and whispered to himself, "This is strength entering me." Slowly, his mind rewired. Instead of associating pain with weakness, he began to associate it with progress. Weeks later, he was running distances he had once thought impossible. This is the secret. Your brain believes the story you attach to pain. If you call it suffering, it becomes suffering. If you call it weakness, it becomes weakness. But if you call it growth, it becomes growth. If you honor it as a sign of transformation, the brain will no longer resist it, it will accept it as necessary. The lotus cannot bloom without first pushing through the thick, heavy mud. That resistance, that struggle, is its pain, but it is also its power. Without the mud pressing against it, the lotus would have no strength to rise above the water. Your life is no different. Pain is the mud. It is the resistance that builds your ability to stand tall in the sunlight. I too have experienced emotional pain. Moments of loss, betrayal, and failure cut deeply. But even in those moments, I discovered that pain was not there to imprison me. It was there to deepen me. Each heartbreak expanded my compassion. Each failure sharpened my wisdom. Each loss taught me to hold on to nothing, but to cherish everything. So, I say to you, do not run from pain. Do not numb it with distractions. Do not curse it as a curse. Instead, harness it. See it as a guide, a teacher, a forge. Every drop of sweat, every ache, every tear is proof that you are alive, that you are moving, that you are becoming. When you harness pain, your brain no longer sees hard things as threats, it sees them as opportunities. And in that moment, you stop being a victim of pain, you become its master. Number 10. Grow in cycles, not straight lines. Many people measure growth as a straight line, a steady upward trajectory, without interruption, without setbacks, without pause. They expect that progress should be constant, visible, and immediate. When it is not, they feel discouraged. They compare themselves to others and say, I am falling behind, I am failing. But this is a misunderstanding of how life and the mind truly work. True growth is cyclical. It moves in spirals, not straight lines. It rises, retreats, deepens, and then rises again. To force your brain to do hard things, you must learn to honor these cycles. I first learned this lesson in meditation. Early in my practice, I became frustrated. Some days, my mind was calm, clear, and focused. Other days, every thought screamed louder than before. I judged myself harshly. I thought, why can't I be like yesterday? Why can't I progress evenly? My teacher noticed my struggle and said, do you think the lotus blooms in a straight line? Some days, it rises above the water. Some days, it retreats beneath it. The water may cover it, but it is still growing beneath. Your mind is the same. Trust the cycle. This teaching transformed my perspective. I began to see my lapses not as failures, but as part of the process. Every retreat, every struggle, every backward step was not a halt in growth, it was preparation for the next rise. My brain, once afraid of difficulty, now began to understand that setbacks are not enemies, but teachers. I remember one young student who trained under me in the martial arts. He was passionate but impatient. He wanted to master every technique immediately. When he failed to execute a move perfectly, he would give up entirely for the day. I told him, growth is not a ladder you climb without rest. It is a spiral. Some days you move forward. Some days you circle back. Both are necessary. Slowly, he began to see his practice differently. He celebrated the small progress even on the off days. And over months, his skills advanced far beyond what constant striving alone could achieve. This principle extends to every area of life. Learning, business, fitness, personal development, all follow cycles. You will have moments of clarity and energy, and moments of fatigue and doubt. Your brain naturally resists continuous effort without pause. The secret is not to force it into linear perfection, but to flow with its cycles. Honor your peaks, navigate your valleys, and trust that growth is occurring even when it feels hidden. The lotus, once again, is our teacher. Its roots grow slowly in the dark, hidden mud. Its stem stretches toward the light, sometimes unseen beneath the water. There are days it seems to make no progress at all. Yet beneath the surface, it is strengthening, preparing for the day it will rise fully.